Ride accidents remain exceptionally rare, with ride-related injuries being even rarer. Though data for the number of ride injuries in 2024 has not yet been compiled, it's expected to follow the same trend as the last several years, with injuries per million riders slowly declining or staying roughly the same as the past few years. In an average year across all regions, the average number of ride injuries is around 0.6 to 0.9 injuries per million riders, with slight variations in this number from region to region. This is exceptionally low, but injuries and accidents do still happen. Today we'll be conducting a review of some of the notable accidents that have happened in 2024. Some of these accidents are quite serious, while others did not even cause injury. These accidents were compiled by the group Amusement Ride Accidents, which gets their information from rider tips and news reports. That being said, they likely do not have a complete list of every accident, and this list is not in any way complete. Finally, this video is intended to provide a basic overview of these accidents, not to dive deep into their causes or results, though some of these accidents could receive their own video in the future. Let's get started. On February 12th, the roller coaster Tomahawk at Portaventura in Spain was operating normally. A storm was approaching the area of the park, but it was not yet close enough to shut down the roller coaster. Winds produced by the storm around the park were within the safe range, and so trains continued to be dispatched. At around 10 a.m., a tree near the ride's layout was blown over by a sudden gust of wind from the nearby storm. The gust was around 60 miles per hour or 100 kilometers per hour. The tree landed with some of its branches in the coaster's path. The train passed through the area where the tree had fallen, and 13 riders experienced injuries. Some were severe enough to require transportation to the hospital. On March 25th, a 1001 Knox ride experienced a mechanical issue when one of its twin drive shafts that keep the rider vehicle in the upright position as the ride rotates broke. The still spinning end of the drive shaft was videoed as the ride slowed down. The ride was stopped as quickly as possible, and all riders escaped without injury. The ride was closed and shipped to its manufacturer in Ohio for investigation into what caused the breakage. On April 3rd, a Tivoli ride spin-out attraction had a section of its decorative paneling break free while operating at a fair in Chester in the UK. The decorative fiberglass section fell into the spinning ride, hitting several riders. One rider sustained a concussion and the ride was closed. The frequency of accidents increased significantly in late April through August as more rides are operating in this time of year. On April 10th, a child was ejected from a Wacky Worm-style children's roller coaster at a safari park in Pakistan. The park claimed that the rider did not follow their instructions to remain seated, leading to them being ejected. But CCTV footage showed that several riders were not secured into the ride, and the coaster was running far faster than designed. On April 22nd, a rider was thrown from a Spanish-made version of the classic Joust ride known as a takeoff at a fair in France. The rider was thrown from their seat after it seemed like the lap bar failed to restrain them during the forces of the ride. The ejected rider was killed due to their injuries. The Spanish manufacturer of the ride, Safeco, is somewhat infamous for questionable ride designs that have injured riders, as we'll see shortly. Fair culture in France and other European countries also encourages riders to try standing up or otherwise to ride in unsafe ways. Both of these factors may have contributed to this accident. On April 21st, a suspended wild mouse coaster operating at a fair in Spain partially derailed. The ride remained partially attached to the ride's track, leading to an evacuation that saw all riders escape without injury. The ride was made by Reverchon of France and had been traveling since 2000. On April 28th, a guest entered the ride area for an inverting spinning pendulum ride at a fair in Brazil. The guest was looking for a lost dog. The guest was struck by the pendulum as it returned to the ground, with them receiving a broken foot. The dog was later found unharmed. On May 16th, a PWS rides attraction similar to a jump ride ejected a rider at a fair in West London, England. The rider sustained multiple fractures and would be partially paralyzed. It was determined that the ride's English manufacturer had designed a restraint system with several electrical and mechanical deficiencies. The ride's owner had failed to maintain this restraint system, in part due to lack of guidance from the same manufacturer. On May 17th, a KMG Move It 24, or Tivoli spin-out ride, operating at a fair in France, ejected a 14-year-old rider, causing them to fall to the ground. They suffered several broken bones. Video taken after the accident show the restraint to have completely opened during the ride. The same video also shows a seatbelt detached from the open restraint. Seatbelts were not originally installed on this ride, so they must have been added by the ride's owner. On June 10th, another Spanish Safeco ride was involved in an accident. This time, a jump-style ride operating at a fair in South London, England seems to have experienced a rider ejection involving multiple riders in different cars. 4 riders were injured, with 2 being serious. This exact model of ride is banned in Australia due to a rider ejection that took place there several years ago. On June 15th, a Zamperla Discovery 360 at Oaks Park in the US was stuck upside down for around 30 minutes. The inverting pendulum ride, like most, uses a counterweight that allows the pendulum to invert more easily. Under exactly the right conditions, it's possible for these rides to become stuck upside down. No riders were seriously injured. One of the 28 riders was taken to the hospital though as a precaution. On June 19th, a guest at Kings Island in Ohio was killed after entering a restricted area under the Banshee inverted roller coaster. The guest was attempting to retrieve keys lost while riding the attraction. Reportedly, this occurred after the operators of the ride informed the guests that they would not be able to retrieve their items until the end of the day. The guest had to clear 2 fences to access the area of the ride, where they were hit by a ride unit traveling at around 68 miles per hour or 110 kilometers per hour. On June 20th, a locally built Himalaya ride at a fair in Mexico slammed to a stop after it appeared that part of its decking came in contact with the moving ride. This resulted in several riders being ejected. Unfortunately, no further information is available. On June 25th, a rapids ride at Six Flags Over Texas stalled after multiple rafts collided with each other, blocking other rafts' paths. Some riders got up from a stalled raft and attempted to reach land as the rapids ride was being drained of water, a time of very high current. All riders involved escaped without injury. On June 30th, a traveling Pinfari roller coaster in Bulgaria experienced some kind of issue that resulted in a rider being ejected from the train during one of the ride's turns. Some have claimed that the ride was having issues with its over-the-shoulder restraints prior to the accident, while others claim that the ejected rider interfered with their restraint. On July 3rd, a children's swing ride at a fair in Wisconsin in the US fell over while in operation. The ride was found to be improperly leveled on the soft grassy ground it was placed on. Luckily, no one was injured. On July 11th, a Zero wave swinger named Swing of the Century at Canada's Wonderland in Ontario, Canada, was operating normally. Around 2:35 p.m., a rider was attempting to reach out to other chairs while the ride was in operation, something the ride's operators had specifically instructed riders not to do. As they attempted to reach another swing, they slipped under the restraint and fell to the ground. The ride was stopped immediately and was re-inspected. The ride was found to have no issues and was cleared to reopen. The rider was able to make a recovery. On July 12th, a KMG Super Miami at a fair in Bavaria, Germany was loaded with riders and operating. During the ride, one of the riders' shoes fell off their foot and onto the decking underneath the ride. A ride operator attempted to enter the ride area to retrieve the lost shoe while the ride was in motion. The ride continued its swing and came down on top of the ride operator. At one point, there was no more than a 20mm or 8-inch gap between the decking and the ride unit. The ride operator was crushed and killed. One of the worst, or at least most disappointing ride accidents of the year, in my opinion, happened on July 18th. A Chance Rides Rock and Roll, built sometime in the 1970s, was operating at the Du Bois County Fair in Indiana. A child was on the ride alone and likely did not secure their seatbelt. The ride was started, and shortly after, the child was thrown out of the car and onto the decking around the ride. Other riders yelled for the ride to be stopped. Once the ride was eventually stopped, the ejected rider was shown the exit. After they exited, the ride continued operating. The ejected rider's family went to speak with the ride's owner, but was told by a representative for the ride's owner to wait until late that evening when the owner would be coming. Meanwhile, the operator of the ride tied off the seat the ejected rider had been sitting in, and nothing was done to learn from or rectify the situation. July was evidently not a good month for swing rides, as another accident occurred on a Zero wave swinger at Lake Winnipesaukee in Georgia, United States. On July 19th, a 16-year-old ride operator was attempting to check riders' seats on the swing ride when the ride was started. The operator attempted to hold on and get the attention of the operator who started the ride, but they were unable to and were flung off the ride. They hit a fence and then fell into the lake next to the ride. The operator would go to the hospital and make a recovery. Rides with more than one operator usually feature some kind of operator enable button that disallows the ride to start unless both operators are present. It's not clear if this ride was equipped with such a system. On July 31st, a teacup ride at Dreamland Margate in the UK had one of its ride units detached, sending the spinning riders into the fence around the attraction. The riders were treated on site and did not suffer any serious injuries. The ride has since reopened. On August 3rd, another accident occurred on a Safeco jump ride, this time at a fair in Vigo, Spain. This time, one of the ride's sweep arms completely detached from the center of the ride. This sent the arm and the rider seated in the ride unit flying into the ride's decking fence. The rider was slammed into the fence, trapped between the ride unit and the fence. The rider died on the scene. Perhaps these rides deserve their own full video at some point. On August 17th, a traveling Ferris wheel at a music festival in Germany had one of its cars catch fire. 30 people were injured by smoke inhalation, and operators were able to remove all riders from the attraction before the fire spread to other cars. Also on August 17th, the Zamperla Wave Swinger at Waldemere Park in Pennsylvania, United States suffered some kind of controls-related issue. The ride was operating normally when the operator noticed that one of the riders was raising their lap bar while the ride was in motion. The operator first instructed the rider to stop doing this, but after they continued, the operator pressed the ride stop button. This button should bring the ride to a controlled stop in the loading position. However, for some reason, the ride did lower, but it failed to stop swinging. This resulted in swings hitting the fencing around the ride before the ride finally started to slow down. Several riders sustained injuries, including broken bones and lacerations. On August 19th, an Eastern European-built breakdance ride operating in Greece broke apart during operation. A rider was thrown from the ride and into the scenery around the ride where they were killed. Later investigation would reveal that the poorly built ride was slated to be sold for scrap in 2020. The ride's new owners in Greece instead carried out makeshift repairs and put the ride back into service. The ride's owner was arrested and the investigation is ongoing. On August 22nd, a wacky worm roller coaster at a park in Brazil started without an adult rider being secured under the lap bar. When the ride rounded a turn, the rider was thrown from the ride and fell to the ground. The rider's lap bar was not secure, but the rider could also be seen in a recorded video from the accident attempting to record the ride on their cell phone, taking their hands away from the provided handrails designed to help riders stay in place. They would suffer life-threatening injuries but would survive. On August 28th, a Chance Rides Trabant operating at a fair in Mexico was operating well above its design speed. The increased forces on riders due to this speed caused a rider to be thrown from the ride into the ground. Further information is not available. On August 29th, another rider was ejected from a wacky worm-style roller coaster. This accident occurred at a fair in the Netherlands. In this case, a child was thrown from the ride from a height of about 3 meters or 10 feet. The child was retrieved from the middle of the ride by the ride operator and told to go to first aid. The child would end up in the hospital with broken bones and several cuts. This was the second rider ejection on this specific wacky worm, with the first happening in 2019. On September 14th, another Safeco jump ride operating at a fair in Spain had another serious accident. This time, a ride unit loaded with 3 children detached while the ride was in motion. The detached ride unit fell onto the decking around the ride, resulting in serious injuries to the riders. On September 17th, an employee was working to help set up the Olympia looping roller coaster at Oktoberfest in Munich, Germany. While the worker was in the ride area, the roller coaster was started. The employee was hit by a train at full speed and was killed. This marks the second time this has happened on this ride in recent years. In March 2022, the same thing happened to an employee attempting to retrieve a lost item for a guest while the ride was in Vienna. On October 1st, a German-built Matterhorn ride at a fair in central Mexico suffered a major mechanical issue when one of its sweeps derailed during operation. This caused the ride to come to an abrupt stop, ejecting one rider and injuring 10 others. The local government would try to cover up the accident, which resulted in several government officials being arrested. The incident has had far-reaching consequences that extend far beyond the accident itself. The condition of the injured riders is not known. On October 14th, a traveling dark ride at a fair in Leer, Germany caught fire. Thankfully, the fire was quickly extinguished thanks to the quick actions of employees and modern fire suppression systems. 6 people would be injured due to smoke inhalation but would make full recoveries. On October 26th, a Czech-made knockoff of a KMG Freakout suffered a major issue when one of its gondolas detached, sending riders flying into the ground. 6 riders were critically injured. Rides from Eastern Europe have gotten a reputation in recent years for being poorly built copies of popular manufacturers' rides. Many of these rides experience accidents that are sometimes quite shocking. On November 24th, a rider climbed out of their seat on the Hopkins roller coaster Desert Storm at Castles and Coasters in Phoenix, Arizona. The rider climbed out after they claimed their lap bar came unlocked. The ride operators failed to notice the rider exiting the train, and the train continued over the lift hill without being stopped. The rider walked down the lift hill and back to the station uninjured. On November 29th, a Chance Rides Rock and Roll operating at a fair in Florida in the US suffered a major mechanical issue when one of its ride units detached and fell off. The ride unit was loaded with 3 riders at the time, all of which survived the fall to the ground under the ride with minor injuries. On December 12th, a traveling Funtime Starflyer at a fair in Birmingham, UK descended to the loading platform while still spinning at close to full speed. 13 riders were injured, with some being serious. It's not clear what caused the accident, but 2 of the ride's operators were arrested for obstructing the investigation. And that list just about concludes the notable ride accidents from the year. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, as several accidents are likely not found by the Amusement Ride Accidents group, and ever since Safer Park ceased operation in 2017, there's no group or organization attempting to record and compile data on every ride accident. That being said, this list gives us a good idea of what kind of ride accidents happen. From this information, we can also pick up on some patterns. For example, Safeco jump rides are very unsafe. This year saw 3 different accidents involving them, and similar accidents have happened in prior years. We also saw more accidents at traveling attractions compared to permanent ones all across the world. Rides made in Eastern Europe have shown once again to be more unsafe than other rides, with some shocking accidents happening on those rides. And there are more patterns in this data that can be examined further, and I encourage anyone who's interested to pursue this topic further. Ultimately, having more understanding of these accidents makes the entire industry safer. Finally, I just wanted to say thanks for watching this channel this year. I'll see everyone in 2025 with more detailed coverage of ride accidents, new and old.